Alrighty, welcome everybody to the first installment of my podcast, Frankie Sports Talk. My name is Frankie. If you know me, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for showing support. And if you don't, I'm a 24-year-old kid from Jersey who has a lot of opinions about things, mostly sports, and I wanted to share them with the world. And since YouTube is the only place that's going to let me yell into an empty void, I thought, why not, right? I'll be mostly covering basketball stuff on this channel, but I will also cover other sports like baseball, football, soccer. If the story's big enough, I'll definitely do something about it. I'll react, but I'm not that much of an expert to give you guys constant commentary and constant analysis of sports that honestly I'm more of a casual watcher rather than a guy who takes pride in studying those games. I'll also be talking about other pop culture stuff, like if Drake drops a new album, Certified Lover Boy in the way, by the way, because I love Drake, and I want to talk about things that I love on this channel, first and foremost, even though the main focus will be sports. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is something that is very near and dear to my heart. As you could see from the screen, it is that team that plays in the concrete jungle, the city that never sleeps, in money-making Manhattan. They play in what's known as the Mecca of basketball, the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. My New York Knickerbockers, one of the most storied franchises in the NBA, one of the original franchises in the NBA. And the reason why I want to talk about it, man, for the past 10 years, it's been rough to be a fan of this team. You know, one year they're good, then the next year they blow it all up and they're trash again. It feels like the Knicks have been in the draft lottery more than any other team in the past 10 years, but they could never get a good enough pick to actually make a difference. And then if they do get a good pick, they waste it on some guy who's not good. You know, you had the Carmelo drama. You had the Porzingis drama. You had the Scott Perry and Steve Mills drama. Just a lot of drama. And this year, they've sort of been the surprise team of the league because they sit above 500 at the moment, and they sit fourth in the Eastern Conference behind only the Nets, Philly, and Milwaukee. So if the playoffs were to start today, not only would they be in, but they would also host a playoff series in Madison Square Garden for the first time since 2013, almost a decade ago. That is incredible, ladies and gentlemen. So during post-editing, I found out that I was wrong about the Knicks, and I'm here with my boy Timmy. Timmy, say hi to the people.
Yo.
Hey. But yeah, actually, it's very depressing. The Knicks are currently 8th, and they're neck and neck with the Celtics and everybody else for the play-in situation. So they might not make it to the playoffs, but it depends. And when you look at how this has happened and what moves the Knicks have done to transform this moribund franchise into something that's at least watchable and respectable, because that's the thing, man. When I used to watch these games last year and even the year before, whenever I would flip through and find a game because I wasn't really looking to see these games, it never felt like the Knicks had any structure. It never seemed like they had a plan. It always seemed like when they were out there on the court, it was just like, do whatever you guys want. We don't really care. But, you know, this year with the hirings, shout out to James Dolan. I guess I got to give credit for this. You know, Leon Rose, Worldwide Wesley, Tom Thibodeau. They've just sort of been able to come in and transform this franchise and make it, again, a nice, exciting young team that's easy to root for and just something to bring back excitement to New York basketball, because as much as the national media fawns over the Brooklyn Nets because they have Kevin Durant, you know, in Jersey and in New York, it's always going to be a Knicks town. It doesn't matter that they have Kevin Durant. This town is always going to be a Knicks town, man. People are going to go to Knicks games more often than not because it's the Knicks. They're a staple in this city. They're like the Yankees. And so to sort of transform this team into something watchable, you got to give them a lot of credit. But at the end of the day, it all starts on the court. And the thing that's been the most visible improvement has been the defense, man. Amazing defense. And at the anchor of that have been Julius Randle and RJ Barrett, man. This defense is terrific. They're third in defensive rating at 108. They're first in points allowed at 103. And Julius Randle, man, has sort of transformed himself into this player that everybody would say, oh, it's just empty stats when he was averaging 20 on the Pelicans. To a guy who's not only an all-star this year, but he has a real outside shot of maybe, because of all the injuries that have happened, making a third All-NBA team. He's averaging currently 23, 6, and 10 on nearly 80% free throw shooting, 40% from the three on 5 attempts. That's a lot of volume for a guy who's not really known as a shooter, and he's knocking them down at a high clip. So when you look at that and you see sort of the steps that he's taking to improve his game, the playmaking has been off the charts, man. Last year, if you watched the game from the Knicks, you would notice that Julius Randle, he couldn't go to his left, and every time they forced him to his left, he would just dribble into triple teams, like all the time, just dribbling into triple teams and getting stripped. That's changed now. He knows when to hit the open man, and even though not a lot of people can really hit a three-pointer on this team, he's been an absolute asset to make this team better. Like I said, man, he's an all-star. He's great. The signing of Alec Burks was a good signing off the bench. He's giving them good scoring. I saw a game against the Wizards not that long ago where he was just absolutely on fire, him and Julius Randle. Emmanuel Quickley, another guy as a rookie to come in, in this condensed season where you're playing so many games in a week. In 20 minutes, he's averaging 12 points a game. His true shooting isn't that spectacular. It's only at 54%, which is basically above average. He's very Lou Williams-like. He's a small guard who can really get a shot within the half-court set and drop in nice, beautiful floaters. But I don't think he's a tremendous, I don't think he's going to be a tremendous shooting. I think he'll be a respectable one. And he's also not a primary ball handler in the sense of he's not a natural distributor. And he's also been having sort of a slump. So it's worrying me a little bit, but not that much because I do think that he'll get it together, especially once he has a full season under his belt and he kind of understands how the NBA works and how these games are going to work. Obi Toppin, I haven't really seen much from him. He's also not been able to see the court. He's been injured. I saw him in a slam dunk contest. He's really athletic. He's a real good slasher. Maybe in another team with a different system, maybe he'd thrive a little more. But I'm not seeing much from him to see him in sort of the plans of the future, because I think that this team, especially after this year, should be looking towards the future. I think that this team should be looking at themselves in a position where, hey, they're the biggest market in the world. I mean, it's New York City. That sells itself. But you want to make it an attractive destination for not only free agents, but for, guys that you could possibly trade for that could come in and make an impact and are actually going to want to stay there. And I'll get to that in a second. But right now, let's talk about some of the problems that this team has. The offense. It's the most glaring problem. It's the offense, man. They're 21st in offensive rating, 28th in points per game. And even though the percentages and the numbers would say that they're a good three-point team because they're 9th in percentage, they don't take that many. They're 27th in attempts. They don't take that many threes, man, because nobody can actually shoot a consistent jumper on this team except for apparently Julius Randle. And again, just bad. It feels like the offense sometimes has no flow to it because they're too slow to get into everything. And it seems like at the end of after they wind down the shot clock, they just say, here Julius or here RJ. Like, it doesn't seem like they could get good easy looks that they could capitalize on because nobody could hit a shot. And that's the name of the game in basketball, man. The name of the game in basketball is you want to get the easiest shots possible, which in this day and age are the corner three and anything close to the basket. Those are the two best shots in basketball and the shots that every team wants you to get. And they don't seem to be able to do that right now because, again, they don't have guys who are shooters. And also, they don't have guys who are natural off-the-dribble guys who could create their own offense at any given moment. And even though Julius Randle is capable of doing that, he's not able to do it at a high efficiency and high clip like a James Harden or a Kawhi Leonard or a LeBron. Like, buckets are very hard to come by on this team, and that's kind of the problem. Because, yeah, man, your defense could be fantastic, but if you can't score with the best of them, you're not going to be able to win anything. And that's kind of, I think, is their biggest problem. Another problem that I notice, because I guess they are a young core, a lot of the times they'll get up. They'll get up in the game. They'll get a big lead going, and it seems like they sort of let off their foot off the gas on defense. Back to that Wizards game that I watched, Julius Randle was going insane. He hit like 7 threes, and they were up by a lot. But then during like the third quarter and the start of the fourth quarter, the Wizards just started making shots, and it wasn't like they were good contested shots. Like, they were just getting a lot of good open shots, a lot of fouls that they were committing, sending guys to the line. Like, just sloppy defensive play, and basically letting the Wizards slowly but surely kind of get back into it. The Knicks Julius Randle came back in the game, and the Knicks kind of put a nail in the coffin. But yeah, man, just stagnant offense and sometimes lack of focus on D, especially when they see themselves up. Like, they're a team that, again, because they're young, might get complacent. And that's where I think a guy like Derrick Rose, which I really liked his addition, helps. He didn't play in that game because he had the vid. But he hasn't been able to play. But I think with a guy like Rose on the floor, sort of being the anchor of the bench unit in terms of the playmaking and the distributing and being a point guard, I think that he could keep the team afloat. And I also think that he brings a dimension to this game, which even though isn't great for the playoffs, which is his ability to score in half-court sets, because Derrick Rose, although he isn't the world-breaking athlete that he used to be, he's still shifty enough and still solid enough to where he could get to his spots. He's really good at switching directions. He has very good control around the rim. He's an excellent finisher. So he could definitely get you scoring opportunities in a half-court set, but how much can you rely on that day in and day out? Like I said, in the playoffs, it's cool, especially if he's coming off the bench, but you cannot look at Derrick Rose to be the guy who gives you your half-court offense all the time. Other questions that this team has: Frank Ntilikina, Kevin Knox. What do you do with those guys? Frank Ntilikina, when he was coming out of the draft, was touted as a defensive monster who could develop into a Mike Conley type of player. He has not been that at all. If Alec Burks and Derrick Rose are getting minutes over you, and your calling card is defense, and your coach is Tom Thibodeau, you're not showing something at practice, which tells me that you're not good. Which tells me good luck in China, good luck in France, or wherever else you're going to have a career, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be the NBA for long. Kevin Knox, another guy, another like 9th pick who was supposed to come in, be a scorer, be a shooter, slasher. Hasn't been able to figure it out either. He's not getting minutes. Mitchell Robinson, the curious case of Mitchell Robinson, because the thing with him is he hasn't really played this year. He's been hurt. He has back-to-back surgeries. And when he's been on the court, he's been a defensive monster, but he's also been an offensive liability. His offensive game still has a long ways to go. And his contract, the Knicks have a club option, which they could exercise, keep him for one more year on a very cheap deal, but then risk losing him in unrestricted free agency the year after, or not exercise that club option, let him become a restricted free agent. Then what you basically do is you match whatever offer he gets, and because his value is low, you could probably get him at a discount. I would say that you do that. I think that you don't risk letting him walk for nothing. I think that you might want him on the team long term, considering that if he does develop an offensive game, he could be a Rudy Gobert type guy. And even if he's not, he could be a Clint Capella type guy, which is a lob threat and a guy who's giving you great defense and getting you rebounds. But if he doesn't, you can maybe use him as a potential trade piece to get something else in return. You never want to let guys who have potential to be good walk for nothing. You never want to do that. Another question, is Tom Thibodeau the head coach of the future? Because we all know that his style runs players into the ground, and when you're the mecca of basketball, do you really think that you are a free agent destination when guys that are coming there on, their 12th or 13th season, do you really think those guys want to play for a guy who's going to play them 45 minutes a night when they shouldn't? I don't know. And the last question is, and this is the biggest question, how much of this can James Dolan not screw up? Like, how much can James Dolan really... How can James Dolan keep himself out of basketball operations so he doesn't screw everything up? Because he's done great till this point. But if he goes back to his old ways where he gets impatient and he doesn't trust the GMs and he doesn't trust the people that he put in charge and forces them to make win-now moves that later down the line turn out to be crippling, then all this that I'm talking about is for nothing. Because he's the biggest it factor, because at the end of the day, he's the one that writes the checks, and he's the one that has the final say on everything. And if he's really decided that he's going to just focus on his band, go listen to JD and the Straight Shot whenever you get a chance. It's glorious blues music. When you think of the blues, you think of B.B. King and James Dolan. I'm sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face. But yeah, go listen to his music, man. His music is kind of fire. But yeah, if he really decides he just wants to focus on that and let people who actually know a thing or two about basketball run basketball operations, then I think this team can position themselves in the future to be a championship contender. And you start that by slowly but surely fixing the offensive woes on this team. And next year they have about $70 million in cap space, so they can go out and get some guys. I would say that they go after mostly veteran guys who could space the floor and give you defense, just your quintessential 3-and-D guys. Danny Green, a Trevor Ariza, a Tony Snell, Patty Mills, Avery Bradley. Guys who, could give you that spacing, but also that defense. And on the higher end of those free agents, maybe a Norman Powell. But the guys that I'm really looking at in terms of big free agency splashes that the Knicks can make this offseason is Lonzo Ball, man. I am mesmerized by what I've seen from Lonzo Ball so far this year. The guy's shooting has been off the chart. The guy is shooting about 7 threes a game, making 38% of them. That's incredible, considering that the guy couldn't hit a free throw 2 years ago. The playmaking is still there. The court vision is just what you'd expected from him. He's incredible, a gift that you cannot teach in basketball. And again, the length and the size, he's improving on defense. And that is something that I think Tom Thibodeau would love, a guy who he could plug in at the 1, who has the body of a 2, and who could just be a defensive sort of anchor in the backcourt. Another guy that I'm looking at is Gary Trent. And I think that Gary Trent solves a lot of the scoring and shooting issues. While CJ McCollum was out on the Portland Trail Blazers before they traded Gary Trent to the Toronto Raptors, it was pretty much him and Damian Lillard carrying the offense consistently. Like, Gary Trent is basically a 20-point scorer in this league, and a guy who, again, what are these two guys going to run you? $20 million a year, $22 million a year? I think that's a solid investment, especially if you get him on a 3-4 year deal with a team option. Like, you're not really... You're making an investment into guys who can potentially become better and not just guys who are going to end up being black holes on your cap, because I don't think that Lonzo is going to regress to a point where he can't outplay his contract. He's 20-something years old. Same with Gary Trent. I think Gary Trent is Gary Trent is sort of what you want from a modern wing in this day. A guy who could shoot the 3, play decent defense, and, just give you a lot offensively, but also do it within the flow of the offense and give you just good efficiency, which is what you want at all times in this new league. Good efficiency. And the thing with Lonzo is I think Lonzo solves a big problem for the Knicks that I discussed earlier, which is now they won't be so slow to get into their sets because if Lonzo gets the rebound, Lonzo is able to push the ball up the floor quickly. And I think that gives guys like, again, Nerlens Noel, Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, all these kind of slasher guys a chance to run to the rim and, get easy baskets and easy shot opportunities, which I think don't come very often with this Knicks team because, again, they don't have the requisite point guard to do that. I definitely think that he is probably the number one target, I would say, of free agency. Like, if you could get him, you should get him. The New Orleans Pelicans have sort of been saying that he's not part of their future, so maybe they will let him walk, but then they didn't trade him during the trade deadline, so I don't know where they're going with him, but I definitely think that if you're the Knicks, you definitely look to sign him ASAP. And then, other potential free agents that you got coming up, not this year coming up, but next year, Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine, that explains itself. And again, just guys on the wing spots who could create their own shot consistently, who could shoot from the three, especially Bradley Beal, a guy who could lead the league in scoring any given year. And I think he could play very well off of Julius Randle, especially when Julius Randle is seeing those double teams in the post. I feel like he'll get a lot more open shots. Zach LaVine, that's more of a dark horse, like, outside shot because they gave up the bag for Nikola Vucevic in Chicago, so they're kind of going all in with this little duo. So I don't think that they'll just let him walk for anything. Honestly, he probably might even sign an extension before he hits free agency, so he might not even hit the market. But those are just some ideas that you could look at to, like I said, improve this team to a point where you see them, again, being championship contenders. The last guy I want to talk about from 2022 free agency that maybe can give you something, Steph Curry. ESPN has been reporting that he hasn't been particularly happy with the situation in Golden State. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if it's them just trying to stir the pot and trying to get stories. But Brian Windhorst was talking about how he was eligible for an extension, and the fact that he hasn't taken it shows that it's like frustration building up because all the young guys and they're losing. He would be 35 by that point. I think that Steph Curry has a chance to have sort of a LeBron James career where it doesn't matter. He'll be 36 and playing at a high level. So I definitely think that if that's the case, I think that you do try to go after him if he's available. I'm not sure. But I definitely think that the Knicks' biggest move that they could make would probably have to be in the trade market. Probably go out and get a guy like Cat, because I feel like he's probably done with that situation in Minnesota, especially considering that they're probably going to get another top 5 draft pick this year. And if it falls out of the top 3, it goes to Golden State, so then they won't even have their pick. So you just lost basically all these games for nothing. And just, when a player gets to a certain age and he wants to win and he sees that the team isn't doing anything, he grows frustrated and he'll probably ask out before he even becomes an unrestricted free agent. So I definitely think that the Knicks should look to get a guy who is a 25 and 10 machine, giving you 50, 40, 90, who could give you 50, 40, 90 splits in some future. Like Karl Anthony Towns, because this year he's been bad, and because he is in the Minnesota market and nobody cares because of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns, talent-wise, man, his ceiling is MVP. And not just like one time, like multiple-time MVP. Karl Anthony Towns is the greatest shooting big man of all time, and he's only been in the league for like 5 years. He is that good. He is incredible. And I know that people might say, well, he doesn't really play defense and he only cares about his numbers. How committed is he to the game? Hey, man, I don't care. The name of the game is put the ball in the basket. Basketball. If a guy can give you 25, 10 on 50, 40, 90 splits, you go ahead and you do it. And that's probably the biggest sort of thing that I would look for. Again, another young guy who can be the core to a championship team And honestly, if you really do want to keep Julius Randle in there, because I don't think that Julius Randle is sort of a guy who I would say is part of the long-term future of this team, but, I think him and Karl Anthony Towns can play great off each other because Karl Anthony Towns can shoot, and so you let Julius Randle sort of be in the paint, and Karl Anthony Towns, with his floor spacing, can let him operate a little easy. And not only that, can probably set Karl Anthony Towns up for some easier buckets. Don't mind the sirens. My window's open. Probably should have closed it before I started recording. But anyways, that's what I think the Knicks could do, sort of improve. But, who's going to listen to me? I'm just some kid in my room making videos. Also, during post-editing, I had to redo the outro because, I don't know, I didn't like how the first one sounded. But it's my first podcast, so please bear with me. Anyways, like, share, subscribe, make me famous. Get me to a point where I get to sell out to my corporate daddy. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate it.